Welcome back to CIS Business Intelligence, the online class, and this is slide group 4-3. In this very short set of slides, we're just going to take a brief look at who the major vendors are who supply the products that we use in business intelligence and data warehousing. And let's start with the data warehousing vendors, specifically those who provide the database management systems that are used to build data warehouses. Now, for the longest time, the major database management systems, and that's what DBMS stands for if you're not familiar with it, Database Management System. The major DBMS players such as Oracle, Microsoft with its SQL Server, IBM with its DB2, they're used not only for transactional and operational systems, but also for data warehousing. Their database engines have been adapted over the years to be able to support transactional processes and the high volume in and out of data, as well as the dimensional properties that we do through either star schemas or snowflake schemas to support OLAP and BI functionality. So notice you don't see products like Microsoft Access on here. They're really not suitable for real data warehousing or real data marts, even though a lot of people run a lot of their reports out of Access or even Excel for that matter. But typically it's products like Oracle, like SQL Server, like DB2 that have been used for years as the backbone of most data warehousing. Now, over the years also, there's another vendor called Teradata that has a specialized version of a relational database management system, which is used for very, very large volumes of data. And in fact, whereas we deal with all kinds of tremendously large volumes of data today, back 10, 15 years ago, Teradata was one of the only vendors that could on a regular basis handle these very large volumes. So you'll typically find a lot of retail and banking and other types of data warehouses that are built on Teradata as well. Now, in recent years, as the volumes of data we've had to deal with have grown exponentially, you've started to see the appearance of what originally were called data warehouse appliances, and basically they're specialized databases. Ones like Asterdata, Netezza, Datalegro, Greenplum, Paracel. What's interesting about each of these is they were all originally from independent companies, and almost all of them over the years have been bought by other major database vendors. So Asterdata was bought by Teradata, which you see near the bottom of the slides. Netezza was bought by IBM a while ago and has been repositioned and remarketed. Datalegro was bought by Microsoft, Greenplum was bought by EMC, and there's plenty of other acquisitions in the mix as well. But the key point is that if you were to build a data warehouse today to support a new BI system, depending upon the volumes of data, the types of reports and analytics, you might go with a regular DBMS like Oracle or SQL Server or DB2. Maybe you would use Teradata, or maybe you would use one of these newer appliances, or maybe even some combination of both if it's a relatively complex architecture. But by and large, these are the major vendors who supply the DBMSs that we build our data warehouses on. Now remember, when we talked about ETL in our earlier set of slides, one of the things that was mentioned in the textbook is that ideally you want your ETL to be done by one of the ETL tools out there, but in some cases, especially if it's a small organization, they can't necessarily afford, or maybe there's other reasons not to use an ETL tool. Over the years, most of them have become somewhat reasonably priced, especially Microsoft's SSIS, which stands for SQL Server Integration Services. So the reasons for not using an ETL tool have pretty much evaporated over the years. So presuming you are, Informatica, who's listed first here, is one of the long-standing players in the ETL space, going back probably about 20 years now. DataStage is a similar product to Informatica, at least conceptually, and goes back to roughly the same time frame, around the mid-1990s. It actually has been owned by a number of different companies over the years, And currently IBM bought the company that previously owned DataStage. So essentially DataStage is IBM's native ETL tool. Microsoft has their SSIS, which I mentioned. There's a specialized product called Ab Initio, which you see in the fourth bullet, which you don't see a lot of, but you tend to have a lot of, you tend to have some banks, especially some retail organizations, that will use Ab Initio because it has some specialized capabilities. So if you ever see that particular name, you'll hopefully make the association between that and an ETL product. Business Objects, which was since bought by SAP, has a product called Data Integrator that works in the SAP world. So those are your typical ETL tools. And now remember, I mentioned that technically you should look at ETL as QE, QT, QLQ, with the Q standing for quality assurance. And remember, take a look back at our diagram where the book showed cleansing actually happening between transformation and loading, but I made the point data quality should occur at multiple places. There's a lot of different tools out there to do data cleansing, quality assurance, what's called data profiling, where you run reports on the data to understand the ranges and lists of values that are actually there. We're profiling the data. And some of the vendors that provide these types of tools are Talend. Oracle has a product called Warehouse Builder. Hart Hanks purchased a product called Trillium. So these are some names you might see. Don't necessarily worry about memorizing the QA cleansing products, or for that matter the ETL products, but I just wanted to give you a survey of the types of products and the vendors that are out there. Now on the front end, the BI side, some of the tools, such as we'll be using Cognos Insight, which, as I've mentioned before, is owned by IBM. Business Objects is another leading tool that is actually owned by SAP. It was purchased by SAP around the same time that IBM bought Cognos. Oracle has a product called OBIEE, Oracle Business Intelligence Enterprise Edition, and essentially what they did, they bought a number of different BI capabilities from companies such as Siebel and Hyperion, Essbase, and Express. And over the years, they've integrated those and done a lot of new development and built their own BI tools. So a lot of the BI vendors that we use out there, a lot of the long-standing ones, especially Cognos and Business Objects, are actually owned by major systems vendors such as IBM and SAP, but a lot of the BI tools are actually still independent companies. So the three that you see under the leaders, there's SAS, which is primarily, their history is more in the statistics space, but they've had BI tools for the longest time, and they're a leading BI vendor, and they're an independent company. MicroStrategy is another BI vendor that goes back to the late 1980s, early 1990s, and they've stayed as an independent company. Information Builders is, they also go back a long time, actually, into the 1980s, and they're an independent company as well. There's a couple newcomers such as Tableau and ClickTech. ClickTech has a product called ClickView, and they're both independent vendors as well. And then there's some open source vendors, ones that work in the open source world, Pentaho and Jaspersoft. So think about BI vendors as being a combination of independent companies who they themselves, that's all they do, or at least it's a primary part of what they do, or in the case of Cognos and Business Objects and OBIEE, they are leading products, but they're also part of these behemoths in the technology world, such as IBM and Oracle and SAP.